Welcome, everyone, to the year one course in virtue psychology. This is a positive psychology course rooted in classical philosophy from the Greek antiquity through the Roman and Christian era. And it is a thousands of year old model in mental health and wellness that is rich, that took thousands of years to develop and occupied some of the deepest thinkers, over the ages. And so I'm excited to offer this course, and I think I'll provide a lot of insight into your thoughts and emotions and those of your clients, and give you a full and whole vision of human nature and how and why people operate and think the way they do. We'll answer, I would say structural questions about how people think and feel. And that will, the fruit of that will be greater understanding, emotional intelligence, and also stability for your clients and possibly for you as well. When I was in my early 20s, I remember there was some point where I realized I didn't know how to be genuine. And even like what that word really even meant. And of course, I knew that being genuine meant, oh, well, I should follow my feelings and follow my gut, and that I should be me, right? But, some quick self-analysis realized that it was almost impossible to use my feelings as the standard of being genuine. Well, first of all, because many of the things I felt were conflicting, and some of the things I felt were awful, and I would never do them. Like, you want to wring someone's neck sometimes, but you don't just go and wring their neck, right? But am I being disingenuine if I don't follow through on every single emotional impulse? Or if I don't follow my gut? What does it mean to be genuine? Like many young people in my early 20s, I was struggling to understand how to live in the world and the best way to be. And I wasn't like, I was more thinking about how to like not be myself than be myself, right? Like, how do I get over myself and try to navigate this crazy world and reality? And then you're like, well, wait a second, I'm supposed to be me at the same time. And so if people are generally a cauldron of conflicting feelings, what the heck does it mean to follow my feelings, right? What does it even mean to follow my heart? And what does it mean to be genuine or to have integrity? And so, I quickly realized that I didn't even know what it meant to have a strong character. And I also really didn't know which feelings to prioritize and how to navigate some basic difficult questions. And I think that the thousands of year study of the virtues is really the answer to those kinds of basic questions that a young person will, try to figure out early in their life. And as you know, as you go through the decades of adult life, that just like keeps going deeper until you have a more stable, secure happiness that you can't easily be distracted from. And so people have been thinking about this for a very long time and have come up with lots of answers. And I would say that the kinds of answers that you can expect in this course are not just like cheap spiritual tricks, right? Because there's thousands of those, and you can pick up any practical self-help book and get lots of hacks for mental health. And those hacks are awesome and wonderful. But here, what we're going to explore is a framework for decision making and a framework for thinking about your emotional life and the emotional life of your clients that will both be diagnostic and also corrective. And so it's that framework. Because we're going to look at this as a framework, we're kind of like, in a way, above the hacks a bit, because what we're really seeking is a certain kind of rational fluidity to navigate, which hack is the best to apply in a particular, situation. Like, when do I apply the hack, let it go? Or when do I apply the mental health quip, I should be a caring, loving person? Because caring and loving and letting things go are sometimes opposite, right? And so how do we navigate some of those difficult, questions beyond the, quick spiritual quip? All right, good. Well, let me give an introduction to the virtues and what they are. And that's kind of funny because it'll take us a while to actually get to the virtues in the course. We're going to sort of end with the virtues and build up to them, but we should know what they are, and then we'll peel back some of the layers and go through the. Actually, you know what? What I want to do here is I'm going to present the whole curriculum. Then I'll give a brief introduction to the virtue, and then the classical clinical model. I'll go there. That way we get the big picture, and then I'll introduce the virtues as a concept, and then the classical medieval clinical model, and then to our first topic, which will be sorrow. And why sorrow? Because in a way, sorrow is the most damaging of the emotions, and so it's a starting point. We'll start at the bottom and work our way up, okay? So let me get to the curriculum. Here we go. Is this it? This is it. So this is in your download box. You have access to that. It's one of the quizzes in this week's course materials. So I'm just going to go through a brief overview of the whole course and then and drill down, okay? So one part of the course is we will teach you how to lead people through the 7 main parts of a whole vision of human flourishing. And by that, I sort of mean, and these are, I would say, are kind of like the transcendentals, right? Like, before we get down into the mucky muck of individuals, we can ask ourselves some really deep questions, like, what is happiness? And well, it's different for every person. And you're right, that each of us are given an individual nature that seeks happiness through various different means, but we'll find out that there's a lot in common and a lot that we can know about everyone's happiness. And that's a deep and very fruitful subject. Then the mind. And by that, I mean reason and the will. The mind is our main tool for seeking happiness. We could say that our entire life consists in using the mind to choose what to do in order to be happy, right? And so we see the immediate relation between the mind and happiness, that to behave rationally is to do things that you believe make or lead to happiness and fulfillment. And to behave irrationally is to want or desire something that makes you unhappy. Well, then we come to the good and evil. Good is simply that which makes you happy. And by that, I don't mean, again, I don't mean pleasure or some like cheap happy for today. I mean a thing that will lead to you having a fully happy life. And evil is the opposite, that which somehow harms you and makes you an unhappy person. And we'll see that it is a very sort of deep, not superficial answer to the question of good and evil. And then finally, the last two parts, reality and the spiritual world. Right? We know that rocks don't do much. But that what's really interesting is the nature that's sort of making things do what they do, right? And so when we think about reality in the spiritual world, we're really thinking about the sort of things external to us that are that we have to navigate, and our base external world and everyday life, but also higher spiritual things and navigating nature, we might say. And so here we see these 7 parts: happiness, the mind, which is reason and will, good itself, which is ultimately good for happiness, and then the world outside of ourselves that we're trying to navigate. So we want to have an understanding of each of those things and their relation to each other in order to navigate and live well, right? We want to have all those things to live well in order. Okay, so then we come to the 7 virtues. The 7 virtues are prudence, justice, fortitude, and temperance, and faith, hope, and love. There should be another little bullet point here for love. But yeah, so we can so the virtues again are excellent habits that can help us do what makes us happy easily, you might say, right? So if I desire things that make me unhappy, then doing things that make me happy will be difficult. Well, if we have these 7 virtues, then doing what makes you happy will be easy. That's the idea behind that. And prudence is simply what to do. Justice is actually doing it. Fortitude is doing it when you don't want to. And temperance is stopping doing something that is harming you, right? That you want to do. So the problem of excessive desire is dealt with temperance. The problem of lack of desire is dealt with fortitude. And prudence is reason, knowing what to do, and justice is actually doing it. All right, so we have these 4 pillar virtues, and each of them have many sort of sub-virtues. So we can understand our mental habits. Then we'll break down goods and evils to the things that people primarily desire. What are the 5 things that people tend to substitute for real happiness? And an obvious one for that is wealth. We all know that having lots of money doesn't make us happy, right? And we know things like seeking, vanity or beauty doesn't make us happy either. But yet those things are very desirable and very good. And so how do we navigate very desirable things without losing our way? And correspondingly, how do we avoid terrible things like injury without making our whole lives about avoiding injury? And so that's area we will discuss 11 root causes of spiritual distraction and emotional disorder. That are attachments. And finally, which is where we will begin the course, we'll talk and review the 11 passions, and both the relation to things that we want or don't want, and how we overcome difficulty. And these give us this sort of, these main 11 passions break down into all the various emotions that people experience. Okay, so the scope of the course is, again, the 11 passions or emotions, and by those, by all of these, I mean cardinal or principal. So there's many sub emotions and sub-goods or sub-virtues. All of those will have, and we'll discuss those. So the passions or emotions, the main attachments, distractions that cause emotional disorder, both good and evil, the virtues, and this sort of transcendentals, you might say, or sort of objective things like truth and happiness and spiritual world and reality and all of that. Okay? All right, the clinical theory of mental wellness, or goal of virtue psychology, is to train your will, your appetite, to desire what truly satisfies human nature, so that you can easily act with grace and make proper use of the external world around you to so that you or your clients will have fulfillment and satisfaction. All right, so this is a kind of mission statement for the course. Is that by the end of the course, hopefully, you will have desires that are synced and aligned with what actually makes you happy, instead of having desires that make you unhappy. And that, and so doing that, you will have a more peaceful inner life and a more peaceful external life as well. All right. All right, good. In this clinical approach, I'll discuss it now, and I'll discuss the virtues afterwards. I'll go through the introduction to the virtues afterwards. That way, no, I'll keep my original order. Okay. Let me go to introduction to the virtues, and then I'll go through the clinical model. I think this will help us. Okay. Happiness, character, nobility, and holiness were some of the aims or goals, or you might say psychological benefits, that led the medieval mind to pursue virtue. And not just the medieval mind, but also the Roman and Greek mind of antiquity. The word virtue itself comes from the Latin word for virility or strength. And this is very interesting because the Greek word for virtue, which was prior to the Latin word, was arete, which means excellence. And so here you see, right from the beginning, that the Romans felt virtue was strength, and the Greeks felt virtue was excellence. And that says a lot about their individual cultures, that the Greeks strived for excellence and the Romans sort of strived for strength and justice. And so you can see sort of word drift over time. Whatever the case, we inherited the Roman word for it, virtue, which has the same root as virility or strength. And the idea is that this will make you a strong person. But if we include the Greek, it will also make you an excellent person. And in both cases, in both cultures, they're seeking to be a happy person. All right. So the goal is to have the source of happiness and excellence, to have that in an enduring way so that your peace is firmly fixed and not easily disturbed by the events of the world, but not in a stoical way where you're sort of, I am an island, but in this sort of very humanistic way where you are relating and feeling everything, but it's not penetrating you to the point of, despair or overcoming you. And so we want to have that enduring happiness, not by the struggle of the intellect, but by intuition. So in this course, I'll be presenting a ton of philosophy, and my attempt is going to be presenting this philosophy in an intuitive way, right? Because typically what happens with philosophy is that it's only accessible to other philosophers. And then it never sort of penetrates to down to the culture. And so the goal here is to make these sort of eternal philosophical truths intuitive so that we can act by them and understand them in a very simple way. I said this some of these parts already. I want to say that the virtues themselves are a familiar concept. Every one of us has heard of them, but we often only have a very dim idea of what they are or their internal structure. How does like fortitude and temperance relate to each other? How does patience relate to, hope and fortitude and humility and blah, blah, how all these things sort of come together? So we know that humility is a virtue. We know that confidence is also a virtue, but are confidence and humility, mutually exclusive? How can we be confident and humble at the same time? Well, we can be. So what people have a concept of what the virtues are, but only a very dim idea of their internal structure, richness, or value. And so formal instruction is kind of lacking in modern educational institutions. And I'll give an example of this. We all talk in a very secular way about the importance of having faith. Like I can go to any public school in this nation and they'll be like, you've got to believe in yourself. And you've got to essentially, when you tell a person to believe in themselves, you're telling them you have to have faith in something, right? Something in yourself, in the project or whatever. If you don't have faith in the project you are trying to accomplish, you will give it up at the first difficulty, right? But if you believe, you will persevere through the difficulty and achieve success. If you lose hope, you will have nothing to protect you from failure along the path. If you have no love, you won't desire to do the project in the first place. You won't desire anything at all. And so we know faith, hope, and love are extremely valuable. Everybody knows that. But what happens is that in a secular sort of context, like public school, where people aren't in a spiritual community, they sort of pursue these virtues haphazardly, right? As I said before, that there's like lots of mental health hacks out there, but no sort of like organization of them into some meaningful model that can guide us to know when to pick one virtue over the other. And that creates a problem. And then, of course, we've been hearing about things like faith, hope, and love our entire life. But could any of us do a thorough job of explaining these beyond a 30-second spiel? Like if I asked you to describe, all of the different parts of having faith and how they interact with each other, so that you could diagnose that like, oh, in this 10th part of faith over here, I'm weak. And so that's the reason why I don't have faith. I have the first 9, but on number 10, I'm like, whoa, I'm like totally missing the boat on that one. And I've identified my problem. I've named the dragon, and now I'm ready to slay it, right? So, if we can't sit and discuss in a 3-hour discussion of all of the different pieces and parts of faith, well, maybe we don't know how to have faith well, right? And so everyone recognizes it's important, but few people can systematically analyze the reason why they lack it, or why they have it. And without that, we can't really know whether we're doing a good job of it or whether we're making big mistakes that's going to undermine relationships, effectiveness, happiness, etc. Okay? All right, so what happened? If these virtues are so valuable, why did they disappear, right? Or like, why aren't we taught these in every one of our educational institutions, right? Our educational institutions are supposed to teach us about truth. These are kind of, seen as eternal truths. Modern universities do teach ethics, But a lot of modern university teaching on ethics is sort of very nebulous and almost like vague, you might say. So what happened? Where did this model go? Well, psychology as a self-conscious field separated from philosophy and religion in the 1800s, and basically around the time that Freud became a doctor. And so we'll see that Freudian psychology is this sort of like, was this inspiration for modern psychology. And what is Sigmund Freud's theory of psychoanalysis? It's basically that repressed instincts are the real cause of all mental illness, and that actually mental illness comes from repressed instincts, and particularly the sex instinct. And I think this is very interesting. Because if we set the two models, the virtues and psychoanalysis, next to each other, you could see that they're really sort of very opposite to each other. That the virtues are claiming some objective truths about how to be in the world if you want to be happy, and sort of honing your instincts so that they work well with reality. And psychoanalysis is saying, well, wait a second. To be healthy, we really need to get in touch with and allow the free flow of our instincts, regardless of whether they match a reality. Like, we need to express ourselves, right? And on some level, we know that that instincts are really important, right? And we know that if we like have a feeling, that it comes from our nature too, right? And so, in a way, feelings are natural. And you see over the last 150 years that there's all these sort of like cultural wisdom that we've acquired on the basis of Freudian psychology, which is sort of like these ideas like following your instincts make you a more natural person. And I always think of that song, Who Let the Dogs Out? That there's this sort of 90s song that's all about sort of just like expressing your feelings and expressing your will in this unhindered way. And that was the model for mental health that Sigmund Freud proposed. And so and I think that the virtue psychology model would affirm that instincts are by their very nature good, but it would qualify that and say, but they're not perfected. In fact, one of the problems with instincts is that they don't see the whole. They only see a part, right? Instincts can't see the whole thing. Reason sees the whole thing, but instincts do not. You get attracted to a part, even though the whole may be harmful. And so our nature, given that we have a mind, is not just that we have a body or an animal body, but that we have this pesky thing called a mind, which is actually the deeper part of ourselves, which recognizes the sort of true harm to our happiness or true help or aid to our happiness. And that is deeper than instincts alone. So we know that our instincts are good, but we also know that they can cause trouble. And so the virtue psychology model is an attempt to sort of deal with the trouble they cause. I would say that Freud created his model for mental health as kind of almost in opposition to the virtues, right? Think of like calcified Victorian moral values, right? Where things became more about social convention than they did about what was truly good. And so whenever something is really great, what happens is it becomes very conventional. And then once it becomes conventional, it becomes stale. And then after it becomes stale, it actually can sort of be a hindrance. And so I think Freud's, sort of opposition to the virtue model of psychology probably came from a sort of stale Victorian, understanding of ethics and morals, and that resembled nothing like the sort of fresh, bold, courageous idea that the Romans had when they called the virtues strength, right? Okay. So so we know that self-inquiry is important. Like, we do know that we don't want to repress instincts to the point where we don't even know they're there, right? We want to understand our instincts and build that self-awareness. But we also don't want instincts to get us into trouble. And so what we kind of want is, again, a model that understands both of these things. And I do think the virtue model does that. All right, and you may have noticed, if you've ever seen a therapist or a counselor, that very often in modern mental health counseling, there's like a lot of questions that are being asked now, and sometimes all that's asked is questions. And so Freud's model has been debunked by modern psychology, but I would say that that modern psychology still doesn't provide a framework of answers. It's very much modern psychology is very much focused on disorder and how you fix disorder rather than providing a whole vision of human happiness. And so positive psychology is a new movement in psychology to sort of answer the basic questions about what health and psychology. What you will see is they make heavy use of the virtues. And so they're going back to that model of antiquity that we will present in the course. All right. So virtues are not about suppressing or repressing desire. And they don't necessarily always tell you what to do, but they provide a framework for excellence and for happiness that allows you to tune your desires to what actually makes you happy. And now it will help you understand why your instincts are triggered and penetrate through several layers of the onion so that your outward behavior, which seems mysterious and which you're trying to fix, right? Like a lot of people are trying to fix their anger, for example. And what you'll quickly realize is that anger is the final effect of the passions. And so if you're working with your anger, what you and you're trying to fix it directly, you're oftentimes missing the boat. Because what's happened is that the passion that's just right behind the anger is throwing gasoline on the fire. And here you are trying to put out the fire when another passion is throwing gasoline on it. And so the passions themselves, knowing their order, helps you actually trace your anger back to its root cause, which all the passions are rooted in love. So we want to trace anger back to love and do it through each step so you can see how all of the passions are leading to a final outcome of anger. One of my favorite quotes from Bishop Fulton Sheen is saying, declares that human beings need to be put together more than they need to be taken apart. And so we're used to, in the modern self-help movement, a sort of deconstructionist idea where you are taking apart the whole person and analyzing the pieces and parts. And that's a very important first step. And then the second step, of course, is putting it all back together when you're done. This course is largely based on the works of Thomas Aquinas, Joseph Pieper, and Boethius, all heavily, and Boethius and Aquinas heavily influenced by Aristotle. So I might even say, and the authors those individuals relied on, yeah, Aristotle, Damascene, Saint Gregory, there are a number of great thinkers that preceded Aquinas, Augustine, Saint Augustine, and we will, get a chance to meet these individuals and their major contributions to the medieval model. But Aquinas, Pieper, Boethius, all awesome authors that really helped to shape Western civilization. And in fact, I would put Aquinas as one of the 5 major figures who shaped Western civilization. And if I could put them in chronological order, they would be Aristotle, Jesus, of Nazareth, St. Paul, St. Augustine, and St. Aquinas, St. Thomas Aquinas. I would say that each of those individuals, like Western civilization would not be what it is without those 5 individuals. So Boethius, he lived around the time of Augustine when Rome collapsed. And his book, The Consolation of Philosophy, is an amazing work that preserved the main ideas of classical philosophy around the downfall of the Roman Empire, when it otherwise would have been lost. And then Aquinas comes in the 1200s, quickly after St. Francis sort of re-embraces nature. And what you saw in around in the thousands up to the 1200s, when Roman and Greek paganism was sort of finally stamped out of Europe, what you saw was a re-embracing of the natural world. And so that's why you see statues of St. Francis in people's gardens. It's because St. Francis, re-embraced nature, which was rejected during the Stoical period. And so Aristotle, who was who was the Greek philosopher of nature, right? You might call Aristotle the Greek philosopher of nature. He was sort of, in a way, suppressed for, you might say, for 1,000 years, while there was this, kind of struggle going on to reconcile this newfangled belief system called Christianity with Roman and Greek paganism, and how the world sort of worked that out in the West, led to Aristotle being somewhat put aside. Well, he was recovered in between 1,000, in this period from the 1000 AD to 1200 AD, and you see like saints like Saint Francis re-embracing nature, and Saint Thomas Aquinas then giving a sort of full intellectual and theological analysis that reconciled the natural world with, you might say, the parts of Jesus that were a little more ascetic in nature, right? He was kind of, in a way, dying on a cross is very self-sacrificial and in many ways not natural. But then he had this like healing ministry. We would go and feed people and heal their body and all that. So he's very much this, the Christianity as a religion was very much sort of trying to figure out how to embrace both, sort of beyond the world and in it at the same time. And St. Thomas Aquinas's work sort of really sort of brings that together in one consistent philosophy. And Aquinas also, he gave birth to like modern law. So like all of our law is based upon Aquinas's work, and just an amazing and very clear thinker. In fact, like, there are times when I've read Aquinas and like been brought to tears by his clarity, which is just, it's amazing. His level of clarity in his thinking is nothing less than awe-inspiring. And he would like walk around followed by 13 scribes at a time and dictate numerous books. And his book, the Summa Theologiae, which we'll be reviewing the first part of the second part. It's a 10, it's 10, I have a copy. It's 10,000 pages, and he dictated it without making a single edit. Like, he didn't write down and like crunch up the piece of paper and throw it out or whatever. He dictated it start to finish without making a single edit. An amazing figure, and one that is just a unbelievable gift to the world. And then finally, Joseph Pieper is a prominent German scholar of the virtues in the 1900s. And his works are awesome, a little dense and difficult to read and understand at times, but also very, very good, and can kind of was the sort of first bridge for me to understanding Aquinas at a deeper level. And I'm sure like 10 years from now, I'll be like, oh, and understand Aquinas at a much deeper level. I mean, you can keep going with Aquinas kind of forever. So, all right. Let's see. I said these other parts better. Good. Yeah, this is a basic introduction to the virtues and a sort of orientation to where this all comes from and its place in history. And with the goal in this course that will make this philosophy practical, intuitive, and accessible to a modern audience, so that not only you will understand it, but that you will be able to communicate it and teach it to others in an intuitive way that will have an impact on their life, that they will feel better, be happier, and more effective people as a result. Any questions so far?
Yeah, I have a couple questions, John.
Yeah,
Lauren.
sure. Mm-hmm.
First off, let me go back to my notes. When you say that faith, hope, and love are the essential values, are they values that come before virtues? Or values
I would say
and
that faith,
virtues?
hope, and love are virtues.
They are virtues. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Because you have it
Yeah.
down as their essential values, so they are virtues also.
Yes. Yeah.
Values and
Yeah,
virtues are the same thing.
I'm not necessarily making that claim, but I was using the term values there in a sort of more modern context. Because if you go to, again, if you're just talking out in society and you say, like, I really value love, they'll think of it, just the word that will be used to describe it is like, love is one of my values, or something like that. And so I was using that in a sort of imprecise way. Would I say all values are virtues? No. I would
No.
say that a value is something that your values are the things that you believe will get you to happiness. Whereas virtues are habits that you can, you can choose to believe in them or not. Like you might say, I really value faith over hope and love. And that may be wrong even. But so values, I would say, are individuals' choice
Belief
about,
systems.
yeah, it's a little bit more about their belief systems, their goals,
But
goals and
not that it's
beliefs.
good, not that they're good, because somebody could value, money.
Exactly.
But the virtue is something inherent in us from love.
Yeah, the
From love.
claim is that the virtues are eternal objective goods that are for everyone and should be chosen by everyone.
Right. Yeah. So that
And that
was
they
my
are, and the seven cardinal virtues are the sort of tree trunks that give rise to all of the other virtues, that each virtue can sort of fit into one of those categories.
So when somebody says, "Oh, what are your values?" That's not necessarily a good thing because that's just your belief system, and that could have been a belief system put on you
Yes.
by your upbringing. So values is not the correct term when somebody wants to know who you are. It's
I
what are
mean,
your virtues?
in another way, it could be the perfect term, right? Because you're kind of testing them. Like if I go up to someone, I'm like,
Yeah.
so
What
hey,
your
what are your
values?
values?
Yeah,
I'm kind of
yeah.
testing them to be like, hey, are your values matched up to mine?
Yeah, that's
That's the
true.
reason
That's
for
true.
asking that question. Yeah.
Right. You can learn a lot about a person by finding out what their values are.
Yeah,
'Cause, yeah,
exactly.
perfect. Yeah, thank you. And the second question is,
You're welcome.
why was nature stamped out during Stoicism? What was the
It
the
happens
premise
all the time.
behind nature being stamped out?
It's a very natural progression. Think of it this way. Nature is great and everybody knows it, right? So
Mm-hmm.
then you're like, oh yeah, well, we just have to be natural. And you see it in music all the time, right? Like in modern music. Well, being natural then becomes following every instinct. And following every instinct sort of leads to, following every desire, and just desires mess people up, right? Like if you just go out and like if you love chocolate cake and you just eat tons of chocolate cake, you're going to get a sick stomach. If you, lead a, if you become lustful because of your sexual desire, that's what we call like a sexual predator, right? So what happens
Mm-hmm.
is that there's always this progression. You can see it over the ages, sort of a recurring cycle where nature will get embraced. And then it will lead to, kind of like overdoing it, like the music videos of the early O's, right? You see like, Britney Spears like sexing it up
Mm-hmm.
like just super intensely, right? And then it's sort of
Mm-hmm.
like, well, maybe she's overdoing it, And then
Mm-hmm.
it leads to like a little bit of suppression. And then once it's suppressed,
Mm.
it's like, hey, wait a second, nature's good. And it kind of goes in that cycle. So that's a kind of perennial cycle that
Oh.
and at different points in history you'll see different things. Right. So in the Romantic period of Delacroix in the 1850s, you saw him going to the near Middle East, like Turkey, and like spending time in the opium dens and painting pictures. Well, they were exploring their natural desires, and Gauguin going to the South Pacific and
Yeah.
exploring natural tribal cultures and all of that. And then right on the heels of that was what? The Victorian suppression of that sort of thing, and
Mhm.
acting in a very moral way, which eventually became calcified. And then you see the cycle. It just keeps going.
Okay, so it's a natural cyclical thing. It's like the seasons.
Yeah.
It's just, it's
Yeah.
that progression. Okay,
Yeah.
beautiful.
So in the
Thank you.
hundreds, in like 100, like, so there was, if you go back to Roman times, there was the sort of Roman, we all remember, hear about these things. Like the Romans would go to these feasts, and then there would be throw up
Hmm.
bins where
Yes,
they could all throw up so they could go
the
eat more.
baths.
Well, guess
Right.
what period followed that? The Stoical period that I just mentioned, where Aristotle was suppressed.
Mm. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was curious about that. Thank you.
Yeah, Rome fell, and then the world went Stoic. Because it
Right.
fell because of its,
Really.
dissolution.
Oh, yeah. The 60s was a period
The
where it
60s.
was,
Yeah, exactly.
we all were in love with flowers and trees and
And what period did the
uh,
60s follow? The 50s, where it was all about discipline and going to war and like
mm,
trying not to die and being heroic for your nation and all of that. And people are
mhm.
like, hey, mom and dad, we need to love more, And so it
Yeah,
it went it happened again. Yeah.
yeah. Okay, awesome. Thanks.
Yeah. All right, good. So we got 20 minutes left. Can I present the entire classical or an overview of the classical medieval clinical model for psychology in 20 minutes? Or am I going to do more harm than good by trying to squeeze it into that? Um, hmm. Yeah. Let's see. I think we'll get, as far as we can and we'll go. Is this too much for 20 minutes? It's probably not. Let's see if we can do it. All right. So, um, I would say if I, were to sort of step back and try to connect all the different components, both religious and philosophical, to the medieval model for mental health, this is sort of what it would be. That in the first step, we would need to gather information. And that means primarily finding people's core motivations, identity, goals, and belief, right? Then we would look to find ailments. What's the problem? So once we identify what they want, then we can sort of look at obstacles, right? Um, that we would look for areas of tension or pain. Uh, what is what are their current life struggles and challenges? What are their emotional habits, and what is the story that they're telling that goes along with those habits. I'm angry because this happened to me, right? And then we would also want to know, well, what are the rubrics you're currently using to solve your problems? And how do you want to solve your problems, right? Like, I want to solve my problems with love, right? That's the desired virtue. Or I want to solve my problems with greater hope or greater fortitude or greater patience or whatever. So what virtue are they desiring? Is their current rubric? Like if you have a bad day, what's the first thing you do? I mean, it's a great question to ask. When you have a bad day, I mean, good to hear your answers in the chat even. When you have a bad day, what is your habit that you use to recover? Very interesting question to ask people. What is your habit? You know, I remember my habit in my 20s, which is probably still my, default, is I get mad, right? I get angry with something. I want to like, I want to like, gather myself together and gather my strength and then do something, right? Which is what, in a way, anger is, right? And so that's a one rubric. But I've acquired more virtuous rubrics than that since my 20s. And I try to use those first, unless you catch me off guard, right? And that's the boat we're all in, okay? All right. Then we want to discover the pathogenesis. Pathogenesis is always the pathway, pathway, the pathway of generation. That's actually not the etymology, but it's an easy way to remember that word. What was the path that the disease was generated in? Patho actually comes from feeling, the word feeling, which is interesting, and we can go down the rabbit hole with what the etymology of that word, fun etymology. But the pathway of generation from the effect and unhappiness to the cause of the error. So where's the error in reasoning or the appetite? Now, when I say will, I mean the appetite or desire. Where did desire go wrong or where did reason go wrong? So we want to look at the errors in intention. Like what are the goals that you're really seeking? And are you actually seeking those goals? What even even in my anger, right? Like if I were to take myself as an example here, in my anger, what is the good that I'm seeking through anger? Like if I decide to get angry at my kids, what am I really seeking? Well, I'm kind of seeking their excellence, right? I want them to be great. And I could get upset if they're not great, right? So then I've got to back off a little bit too, right? Then I got to sort of be like, okay, Dad, So what's the good that I'm seeking in the anger, or what's the good that you're seeking in your emotional habit gone awry? What about so there's intention, and then there's also reason or false beliefs. Am I just mistaken about how much happiness money will give me? Or um, or here's another one, like, I could easily get caught up in trying to solve problems. I tend to be like a solve problem kind of guy, right? I'm a good consultant. But we all know that great leaders, they reach for something great. They don't get stuck in problems all day, right? So an error in reason could be, oh, if I fix every problem, it'll be perfect. But what about the other belief? If I reach for something great and that becomes a rally cry for the world, won't we achieve more that way than by fixing individual problems? Can't we just like skip beyond the problem and go straight for grab that bull by the horns, right? And do something great. So those kinds of errors in thinking, I would put in false beliefs about the value of something. And then we can look at errors in habit, which are the distracting goods and evils. We talked about them, and the passions. And then the virtues and vices themselves are also habits. Virtues and vices are habits of reason. Passions are habits of the sensitive appetite. The animal body, the part of our humanity that is animal, not rational. Okay? We want to look at the story of how this trauma developed. Who was the agent? Who hurt you? Who gave you that trauma, right? What are the phantasms associated with the trauma? What images do you have of getting traumatized? It's because you have your story and we can all tell the story. But when a person's telling a story, there's this sort of fixed image in their head of what happened to them. And that vision itself needs to be healed, right? We need to take that vision and make it like holy in a way, right? We need to sort of transform it. Not that we make evil holy, but that we have to sort of reconcile it or integrate it. And we'll talk about how to do that, in the right way, so that we can process our trauma, right? How is this story or this phantasm is the image associated with a memory? How are those inflaming the passions? Did that trauma make you an angry person, a bitter person, a fearful person, a daredevil, a person who just follows their desires too much, or a hating person, or whatever? How did it inflame your passions? How did it create weakness in your will? And then tying that back to your sense of your own personal value and identity. How did this trauma create a crisis in your personal value? Okay, so that all is as regards the story. We had reason, we had the errors in intention or having the wrong goals. We had errors in reason, which is believing the wrong things. We had errors in habit, which is the virtue, the passion, or the attachment. Now we have the story behind it and all the parts to that story. And of course, with every story that's meaningful, every traumatizing event, there's a spiritual affliction and possession, right? A nature grips you, right? What do we mean by possession? Now, a lot of time, if you look at modern, modern texts, they kind of have a very condescending attitude towards the medieval idea of demons. And it's because the modern people think of demons as this sort of like in a personified way, right? That they think of it as like shaped like a dragon or a monster or like a devil with a horn and a forked tail, or whatever that thing is on his tail, right? Like that's not what medievals thought demons were, although they would paint them in that way because you have to communicate somehow. But a nature that sort of attaches itself to you, like a spirit of anger, or a murderous spirit, or a spirit of bitterness, or a bitterness towards one's marriage, or towards one's children, or towards one's family, or society, or whatever it is directed towards. There's a certain nature that has taken hold of the mind. And so this whole discussion, the medieval discussion of demons and exorcisms and all of that kind of thing, which was a very big part of mental health, is all about getting a bad nature out of you. And it's hard to do. It's very hard to do. We all know traumas are very difficult to overcome, and the beliefs that which are the spirits that that take hold of us as a result of our trauma need to be kicked to the curb, right? Okay. So, and that's, so that's hard to do. And then we also have the physical tension, right? So it grips us. Things grip not only our mind, but also our body and create tension. Like people carry their traumas in their shoulders, the issues in the tissues kind of thing. They carry it in various parts of their body, in their thighs, in their stomach, a pit in your stomach. They carry it in their heart. They carry it in their solar plexus. They carry it in everywhere, their eyes, their jaw, their lips, so we've got to find that tension and unwind it. Now, I'm not going to teach in this course exorcisms, and I'm not going to teach in this course a lot about unwinding physical tension. We teach how to deal with tension in our Ayurveda courses, and the practice of deliverance will cover parts of it, but actual exorcism of spirits is a little beyond the scope of this course and gets into a little bit more of a particular religious and much more religious context than is the scope of this course. But a fascinating one I'm willing to talk about at any time in a more informal way. All right. Okay, so all of that was assessment, right? All of this was assessment. What is the nature that's gripped you? What is the story that led to this? What are the habits, errors in goals, error in reason, and false belief? And yeah, okay. So step 2, we want to correct the correct reason, right? If a person has an error in reason, we want to correct it. We want to affirm the ideal. Carl Jung said the best way to heal a psychosis is with something better. Now, I'm not a big Carl Jung fan, but I like that quote. The best way to heal a psychosis is to replace it with something better. I think Carl Jung's got some real issues, but I love that quote. So what is better than your current preoccupation? It's a great question. Another part of correcting reason is, I would call it redemption. How does God want to use the past for good? Okay, you did a boneheaded thing, you hurt yourself, you may have even destroyed a part of your life, right? We've all done it. Like, I have destroyed parts of my life through my own boneheaded actions. And am I going to sit around and wallow about that the rest of my life? No. How does God want to use my past for good? Even the painful, shameful, difficult parts. I also want to know the full ramifications of fixing it, right? Like, what if I fix something that's going badly? What would happen? How would my quality of life improve, right? And I might even put that then, personification. The virtues themselves, in a way, are spirits, right? This is, again, the medieval mindset here, is that they would personify the good, right? To see the good as like a person that I want to reach and get to as a kind of goal in and of itself, right? So what is, you might say the angel of love or the angel of faith or the angel of, right? That would be very much a kind of medieval way of personifying. And you saw that they personified the demons as well, right? Then continence of action. What actions do I need to suppress? Now, this is the least effective. Very difficult. Continence of action is very difficult, but not impossible. And it's important, and we all have to do it, right? We all have to know how to not eat the chocolate cake when we want to, or how to not pursue something that's going to destroy us, even though we want to do it, right? Continence of feeling is better. Continence of feeling is when we suppress the feeling itself that is going to harm us. Like, okay, I'm not even going to look at that chocolate cake. I am not going to think about chocolate cake. Don't think about white elephants right now. I'm thinking about something else, right? That would be continence of feeling. And that's necessary too. not to the point of repression, which was, Freudian kind of thing where you like, somehow it becomes a part of your subconscious, but to not sit around indulging in feelings that are difficult to control. Temperance would be finding joy in the correction itself. So temperance is when you can like enjoy the right amount of the chocolate cake, not that you, run away from it at a fear, not that you overdo it, but that you kind of have things in the right measure. And that is temperance. And I'm singling out chocolate cake here, but really you can see how this would play in all kinds of situations. Whether it's you know, temptation to, tell those little white lies so people like you more or whatever it is, right? You could kind of look into all different kinds of areas where we need the right thing. We're not going to just, hit people over the head with the truth either, but blah, blah, blah. We need temperance in that area. Okay. And then support, identifying strengths and virtues and how these can aid success. So all of that would be correction in reason. All right. St. Francis de Sales says, also contemplate your error. If you did something bad in your life that you're like not too happy about, but it's also difficult for you to not do it, you really want to contemplate the full effects. Like, how is this really hurting me? And so on and so forth. Similar to the way we would contemplate the ideal and the good, we will also contemplate the error. All right, and then it looks like we're out of time here. So on the subject of deliverance and correcting the appetite, there's a lot there. We can go through that in a future class. Before I end for today, I'll say again, I put some exercises on the subject of sorrow into the week 1 exercises, which are due this Sunday. And then we will review some of those in next class, and I will also provide a more thorough introduction to sorrow in next week's class, giving you the overview so that when we look at all the individual exercises that you will have the big picture. And then we'll continue forward with the passions. So I want to welcome you all to this deep course in medieval psychology and borrowing from antiquity and thousands of years of development. So I hope you discover a lot about yourself, and I hope you discover great tips that you can not only use to help your clients' mental health and wellness directly, but also if you're in another kind of health and wellness practice, their compliance, or if you're raising kids, your kids' compliance, that you will be able to more easily motivate the people in your life to the good and happy ends that you desire for them. So with that, I hope you enjoy the year very, very much as I will enjoy it, and I look forward to knowing all of you more, and also sharing with you my own failings and successes on this road, so that you get lots of good, very personal, understanding of the journey. So take care, everybody.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.